Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fanfiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
As the landscape transformed from heaven to hell in the blink of an eye, the three headed down the path that would lead to the ruined temple that served as Demiurge's home. This pathway was treacherous in every definition of the word. Demons, undead, and all manner of magical beasts flanked every side of the road, leaving very little left that would be safe. Even without them, many other powerful monsters occupied this realm, that could easily lay claim to their lives if all of them attacked at once. However, they were all firmly under their control as the vassals under Nazarick. So naturally, these creatures keeled down in their presence as they walked down the walkway to the center of the world of flame. Some pledging their fidelity in silence, and Gurin, while not seeming intelligent due to it having no distinguishing traits to signify higher brain function, even bowed in acknowledgement to Buku Buku Chagama. Likely because they shared the same ancestry as far as race was concerned. Man, Ulbert really went all in on this place, didn't he? While Ulbert was not the only one to work on this floor, he was the main contributor. Therefore, most of the finer details could be traced back to him. He said he wanted it to be a place that would make any hero fall into despair, an incarnation of the word evil. Not only was the central piece of the unholy land a religious temple that had been utterly sacked, but various other imagery were scattered throughout the realm that would represent the downfall of all that was good. Screams replaced the sounds of wind in this place, as if to give both an audible and visual understanding of the torments that occurred here. Angels were tied up to mast in the center of great infernos, while smaller demons prodded them with pitchforks. Various bodies of what looked to be priests were scattered about, wearing tattered robes smeared with blood, and even a live performance of demons skinning multiple humans that had been strapped to a large wall, then would heal them to repeat the process. I don't remember the decoration being there. Well, it has been a while since I visited the 7th floor in person. I probably just forgot. Yeah, that guy really knows how to make appearances, doesn't he? If I was an adventurer and found this place, I'd flee without a second thought. It's a textbook example of the word, hell. That it is. I haven't visited many of the floors in person in a long time, so I had forgotten just how much we had put into some of them. The only ones I've really been to in my time here were the 9th, 10th, and sometimes the 6th. Though thinking back, maybe we should check some of them out. When we have some leisure time, then sure. Didn't we make an underwater city in a secret pathway on the 4th floor? You're right. I had almost forgotten that. The coral we used for lighting really gave it a mystical feel, didn't it? After seeing the other two nod in agreement, the conversation ended, as they had reached their destination. The domain of the 7th floor guardian, the broken temple. The roof was almost completely gone, and the statues of various gods could be seen shattered along the path to the entrance, as well as the sides of the building. They entered the building in silence. As it would be terrible rude for them to continue to talk and not greet the demon right away. However, before they could reach him, a voice was heard coming from the throne room. The sheep are becoming restless? How so? Well, during the new social experiment we had been instructed to perform, many of them fell into despair and began to attack the other members, which resulted in heavy casualties. Strange, I would have thought by now they would have foregone such methods. The experiment in question that Demiurge had ordered to be conducted was to bring in a child from one family, then a relative from the same family as the subject. They would then be asked to kill one of the subjects to see which they valued more, the life of a child, or the ones they had grown closest to. Every one of them seemed to kill the relative of the other family. However, the other family had also been given the same experiment, with the children of the other, which meant in the end, everyone had fairly lost someone close to them. The goal was to see how they would react, since everyone would be guilty of the same thing. Well, no matter. It's a calculated loss. I will simply have to inquire to Ainz-sama if he will allow a restocking. Of course, Demiurge. If you need more sheep for the benefit of Nazarick, then it is of no consequence to me. You may do as you wish. With perfect timing, the trio stepped into the room to greet Demiurge, which prompted the demon, as well as the abyss demon beside it, to kowtow in servitude. Ainz-sama, as well as Pararanseno-sama and Buku-Buku-Chagama-sama. I must thank you for granting your servant's request, as well as choosing to come visit me in my humble abode. While his courtesy was appreciated, the area could hardly constitute as a room, since the ceiling was missing, and most, if not all of the furniture had been destroyed and could not be considered humble by any stretch of the word. Your thanks are not needed, Demiurge. Your loyal service is all that I require for thanks. But on to the main topic. As you may know, Touch-san is planning on heading back to his old world, however we have yet to find any way of how that is possible. Thus we seek your knowledge on a certain matter that may help us. It is my belief that beings similar to what I am began to appear in this world 600 years ago. While very little beings can live to such an age in this world, we need to learn of any long-lived beings that may be knowledgeable of such a topic. Have any such beings appeared in your intelligence networks? Indeed, Ainz-sama. I believe I sent you some reports on how we may be able to deal with such beings should the need arise. Oh, of course. However, I am not confident on being able to remember every such being that exists. So I had come to you to seek your knowledge on the matter. Very well, Ainz-sama. Although you needn't be so modest with claiming you can't remember such things. No, really. Ahem, well then Demiurge, go ahead and brief us on the matter. The explanation went on without incident. While many of the names Ainz had heard before, such as the frost dragons that had subjugated recently, Flutter, and many other names he felt had no value. However, four in particular stood out to him. The Dragon Lords of the Council State. The Queen of the Dragon Kingdom. The King of the Elven Nation. And the vampire known as Landfall. These four were the ones that both he and the siblings agreed were the most promising. Though the information they had on two of these could be considered to be lacking. The first was Landfall. Demiurge stated that he had confirmed her to now be acting under the identity of Evil Eye of Blue Rose, however he felt she would not be of much assistance. While they could guess she was one of the 13 heroes of old, that only went back 200 years, and she would only be able to detail events with the demon gods, who Ainz filed as low priority, as they seemed to be rather low-leveled if they were even players. The King of the Elven Nation was an enigma, however. Demiurge said that not even he had found out his real age yet, though he had assuredly been around for a very long time. Possibly even longer than Evil Eye. While he said the Elven Nation was still a ways off in their plan for domination, but if the Supreme Ones willed it, then he would make it so. Ainz quashed the idea, however, saying that he would be a last resort, as there was too little info as of yet. And then the group of beings which worried them the most, the Council State's Dragon Lords. Ainz-sama, if you will permit me to interject, I feel that while they may be the ones that we seek, though I would not advise heading there yet, as the assailant who attempted to take your life is still unknown, and the prime suspect is the head of that state. Ah yes, that Riku Agania, the decidedly false name he had went under. While we are not certain of his identity, we have decided to send emissaries to them now that we have freed some manpower. We will have to see based on his reaction whether he truly is that mysterious attacker. He turned to the very confused Pararanseno and Buku Buku Chagama as if to say, I'll explain later. I quite agree. And if the Platinum Dragon Lord is the true culprit, then we must be wary of the others as well. While 5 or 7 of Rika's level would not be able to breach our holy abode, it could be problematic for excursions outside. While it felt ironic for him to call the place holy while they were in a decidedly unholy location of the tomb, the message still carried across. Though I feel simply destroying the nation outright would solve any issues, however, I get the impression that is not what you seek. And what of the Dragon Kingdom's queen? While we don't believe she is as old as any of the other beings, she seems to have inherited the bloodline of a dragon lord, and therefore has been granted royalty status. And at the moment, their forces have become strained due to their war with the beastman country, so I feel that it would be the perfect opportunity to learn more about the dragon lords, and confirm our suspicions. An excellent idea, Demiurge. I was planning on sending emissaries to them alongside the council state, but now we have the perfect opportunity to act as saviors to them, as well as gaining the info we seek. The plan had few risk and much to gain, though there is something that concerns me. You mentioned that she has the bloodline of a dragon lord, so wouldn't they be adverse to us attempting to head there? Yeah, I was thinking that as well, Mamanga-san. Dragons aren't exactly the easiest enemies to battle. Ah, no, my lords. The dragon lord that she sired from seems to have gone somewhat incognito, and nobody has seen it in decades. So I feel there is no issue on that front. Though we should survey the area during your visit with high-level stealth vassals just in case. So in other words, now is the best time to head there, as they lack the fighting force to face us if they choose to be hostile, but they also have information that could help us with our goal. It does seem to be our best option. Right, Oniai-chan, but what is the story between you and these dragon lords, Mamanga-san? During our conquest of the kingdom, a strong foe had attempted to take my life, and with the information we had acquired, we narrowed it down to the Platinum Dragon Lord, or one of the 13 heroes of old. So we need to be cautious, as he possesses abilities that I have never seen, that only a world-class item could hope to replicate. Looks of understanding dawned on the faces of the two, as they realized why they were taking such caution. If the opponent had a world-class item, then they needed to be extremely guarded against them, even if they outnumbered them. Combine that with the unknown assailant that had brainwashed Shaltir, we're really operating under a razor-thin margin of error. Wait, what happened to Shaltir? Anger boiled over Ainz as the memory of what he had to do to his friend's beloved daughter resurfaced, but was quickly quelled by his emotional dampener, though he still had a small flicker of hatred in him at the thought, as not even that could hope to fully rein in his ire at them. Yes, I'll need to explain to you what happened later on Peroroncino-san, but for now we should head for the kingdom to understand who we are dealing with. I'll tell you the story on the way there. Very well, my lords, then I wish you all the best of luck. However, will the remaining Supreme Ones also be accompanying you there? No, it's just us. Albert-san and Touch-san both said they were going to stay here for the time being. A smile blossomed on Demiurge's face, though nobody in the room was clueless as to why. Now that they had what they needed, it was time to commence with the next phase of the plan. The leave for the Dragon Kingdom. Thank you for your assistance, Demiurge, you truly are the greatest mind in Nazarick. Your thanks are wasted on one such as myself, my lords. Besides, a bitter smile overtook his joyous one as his line of sight shifted to Ainz. My intellect could not possibly hope to compare to Ainz-sama's. The two exchanged confused glances as Ainz desperately tried to deny his delusions. Yet in the end, he was forced to give up, as in a battle of words, he would never overcome Demiurge. Let us be off. We'll walk through Irantal, and then take a carriage, as I haven't been there to use teleportation magic. Follow me, guys, I'll show you the city I've created. And so the trio left in high spirits, with Demiurge looking out towards their receding silhouettes, and though to himself, Ainz-sama is too kind. To think he considers me smarter than himself. But I wonder, in what way will he utterly dominate me in the hearts of the people this time? Foo-foo. Whatever plan he had come up with, it certainly will outstrip even mine. High up in the capital of the Draconic Kingdom, lay the castle of the Queen Draudelin. While one might expect it to have a professional air, given the fact that the ruler of the entire kingdom resided here, today the mood was entirely the opposite. Many throughout the castle were in a panic, rushing to get from place to place, which resulted in a furious uproar. While the throne room was in polar opposite to the pandemonium downstairs, they weren't faring much better. The room was so quiet, that once may be able to hear the metaphorical sound of silence. Grim was the only way to describe it. So, they've taken yet another city. The man who had said this was the right hand of the queen, Karen. While everyone had heard this news up until now, nobody had the strength to say it until him, which was the spark to set the room alight once more. The Draconic Kingdom consisted of 6 different cities throughout its borders. They had already lost 3 beforehand due to their forces being overwhelmed by the ferocious beast that swarmed them like a broken dam. Needless to say, with only 1 city remaining before the capital came under siege, their situation was hugely problematic. So we've lost yet again, huh? Ha! Damn those beast men. And damn the slain theocracy. We've already given them their payment to assist in the war, yet they choose to leave us to die this time around. Argh. This childish temper tantrum came from, surprisingly, the queen herself. While only her confidants knew this, she wasn't exactly the monarch her people thought of her as. Or rather, it would be better to say her personality was troublesome. Yes, it would seem the Beastmen Commonwealth have deployed their cavalry golems at long last, and as a result, not only was the city of Nerod taken over, but the Soul Adamantite team have died as well. While everyone knew this, it still brought despair to hear it out loud. So the world's strongest pedophile is dead, eh? Well, I don't know if I should be happy that I don't have to deal with him anymore, or saddened that we just lost our best fighting force, so I'll just refrain comment. While she was joking, nobody laughed. Your Majesty, what should we do? While this was the natural question to ask, answering it was very difficult. They had relied too heavily on the military power of other nations, as well as only having their adventurers to make up the gap in fighting strength. As a result, they seemed to be dead in the water. You should know that as well as me, right? Everyone in the room merely looked down at the floor after knowing what she was implying. When word had gotten out that a new country was being formed known as the Sorcerer Kingdom, and that country was going to war with Ainz, they had ignored the news as they had to focus on their own problems. However, as the news of the events that transpired, as well as other rumors about the kingdom began to circulate, they were merely stunned. How could one man possibly kill 70,000 people with one spell? The very thought was madness. Yet as more and more rumors and deeds of the Sorcerer King's accomplishments began to reach them, the queen had made a decision. When the true war with the kingdom was announced, she had given her official seal to approve of it. While they had never been enemies, they were already on the brink of collapse. It was the best option at the time to save her own people. Since we approved the war they just had, we may be able to convince them to lend us forces from their nation to drive back the Beastman. It's clear they now hold the title of the strongest nation, so it would be good to curry favor with them, no? But Your Majesty, the ruler of that kingdom is one of the undead. Are we truly entrusting our future to it? This voice seemed to be extremely strained as he choked his words out. It was clearly the voice of a man who was out of options, but still did not want to go through with it. That undead went to the most religious country in the surrounding nations bearing the theocracy, and now they completely shifted their outlook and a religion has formed to worship him. I don't think a regular undead could accomplish that, so it's clear something else is going on. Besides, what choice do we have? We have nothing to risk, because even if we choose to shun them, we'll just fall to the beastmen instead. This is simply our best option. Seeing that no one had any arguments, or it would be better to say that no arguments could be given, she continued on with her stance. The Sorcerer Kingdom seems to be branching out to other countries lately in peace. If any diplomats show up, immediately welcome them without delay, and inform me as soon as possible. This country may not survive without them, so we must be cordial. Until then we must remain vigilant at all times now. This is my command. I won't let my country fall to the likes of those savages. With this rallying cry from the small child, the people went back to their task, praying for a miracle to befall them. Ainz left the tomb rather excited with his friends in tow, as the whole reason he had made the Sorcerer Kingdom was to recreate what they had in Ainz Old Down, where race did not matter, and one could be as they were. A haven for not only the people of this world, but for his friends in the guild. And now the opportunity to show off the fruits of his labor had finally surfaced. Though the real work was accomplished by Albedo and Demiurge, Ainz had been the one to decide the direction. Though on the way to the city gate, the streets were noticeably more barren than usual. The reason for that was not hard to guess, as Ainz himself was already quite scary to the masses. Having to see creatures of power surround himself was no doubt enough to send even those with the strongest of hearts running. While Ainz understood this, he could not care less. The fact that he was able to walk beside his friends once more through the city meant more than the city's inhabitants. If this were the Ainz of a week ago, and he was told he could see his friends again by destroying his city, he would have ordered their genocide without a second thought. Though I can't say I didn't expect it to be like this, it's still somewhat disappointing that the citizens flee at the sight of us. Well, that can't be helped, given our appearances. Maybe you two would, but I think my appearance gives off a very regal and beautiful aura, you know? Slimes and skeletons aren't exactly known for their beauty, you know? Well, the inhabitants of Nazareth would have to disagree with you on that one, but I see your point. Besides, the reason they flee is because of our power, not looks. Well, it still hurts my self-esteem to see beautiful women flee when they see me. He gave an exaggerated look of sadness as his upper body went slack to drive home the message. I would think that you would be used to that by now, bro, given the way you act. While Ainz would have thought a rebuttal was heading her way, Perorancino merely sunk even lower to the ground, which looked quite comical given how he was trying to walk as he did. As they drew closer to Irantal's exit, the population around them was getting denser, due to the amount of people here not having time to leave. Though mostly humans were in the vicinity, many types of demi-humans could be picked out among the crowd, with some even running shops. If one disregarded their fear, it may be considered an ideal society. Though they naturally kept their distance. Man, is it just me, or is everyone here super good looking? I'm gonna have to agree with you there, little bro. It's almost depressing. Since all of them were a heteromorphic race, things like maintaining appearances or looking good would naturally not come up to much, so they were able to handle such things. But the humanity in them could not help but compare themselves to the bystanders. Had they entered this world in their human forms, they would surely fall into despair at the unfair difference between themselves. Still, it almost feels quite similar to Yggdrasil. Though it is still a shame that the non-human races are still in the minority. While I have plans to rectify that, I don't think that will happen anytime soon. For one, other races tend to stay within their own habitats, and it's only the minority that feel the need to leave to see other areas. Plus, the original inhabitants of the city were human, so it's only natural they would make up most of the population. Ainz knew from the start that his plan would be difficult to create. Not only were the humans of this world incredibly xenophobic, but the other races aren't too keen on leaving their homelands, as his visit to the lizard men showed. Though that didn't matter too much to him. As long as he could make the races coexist, then it didn't matter where they were located. Not saying it needs to be super diverse, but it still is a shame. Though I guess it was the same back then, like I said, so it almost feels nostalgic. Yet being feared still feels a little lonely. Maybe, but it's dozens of times better than being disrespected. Had we shown up here at a low level, we would have been killed or turned into slaves, so it's not as if it's completely without merit. Though I will admit, not having anyone to talk to on your level is quite saddening. Which is yet another reason I'm glad you all came along. The other NPCs are quite a handful when they think everything you say must be the providence of divine intellect. Yeah, Demiurge mentioned that his knowledge could not hope to reach yours or something. What's that about? While Chagama had asked the question for her own sake, Ainz was hoping it was brought up so he could clear up any misunderstandings that may occur in the future. I was meaning to tell you that. Because we created the NPCs, they believe us to be their all-knowing gods, and thus they can never reach our level. Haven't you tried to correct them? I haven't, for various reasons. It started out as me simply playing the role of an absolute ruler so they would want to serve me, and wouldn't betray me after seeing they all were much better than me. And not but right now, I just don't want to disappoint them. While none of them had children, they could understand the feelings of not wanting to let down people who look up to you. Add that to the fact that ridiculous coincidences that keep occurring that make me look like a genius, and all of a sudden it seems I can do no wrong. Coincidences? Like what? I have to tell you them on the journey, Chagama-san, as there is too many to count. Besides, we've made it to the group having finally left Irantal, stared ahead at the vast plains shrouded in fog that seemed to stretch out in all directions. From what I've been able to gather, the Dragon Kingdom lies on the other side of the Katsa Plains. Though it is quite vast and is filled with undead, it is nothing we can't handle. That being said, create greater item. As soon as the spell was cast, a luxurious carriage that was far wider than it was long appeared out of thin air. The vehicle was far in excess of anyone's budget, be they king or noble, yet Ainz had made it at a whim. Though the decorations seemed to be pushing the limits on what would be acceptable, and it seemed that the merest decoration would cause it to feel over-designed, it was no doubt something that would inspire awe in onlookers. Something that would be most helpful when heading to a foreign nation. At least if his books were anything to go off of. This should be enough to accommodate us for the time being. And the steeds should be here any. Ah! There they are right on cue. Two horses of bone and fog made themselves known. While many in the New World had no idea on the names of these creatures, anyone from Yggdrasil could immediately pinpoint their species. Soul eaters, huh? I guess that makes sense. That reminds me, I was seeing quite a bit of Death Knights in the city. How are they here? You couldn't get them as mercenary monsters. As they had left the tomb and were still in the lessly populated areas of Irantal, many of the city's guardsmen were seen walking around. While Pero Roncino wanted to ask about it, it wasn't the main topic of interest at the time. Some things have changed in this world compared to the game. One of these changes is that undead can exist indefinitely if a corpse is used as a medium. It's quite useful for amassing armies, I'll say. But where did those corpses come from? While there wasn't much indignation in his voice as he knew his friend would not go slaughtering innocents for the sake of an army, he could sense mild worry in his voice. They used to be from groups that opposed us, but since those have died down, we've been using criminals that were sentenced to the death penalty. That's quite efficient. And it dissuades crime at the same time. Yeah, the merits are quite nice, I suppose. Though the amount being made is almost too much. He began to talk as he stepped into the carriage, and the others followed suit. The carriage's interior was even more spacious than what the outside would imply. The ends of it were at least 4 meters apart, and it was filled with many luxuries that one would not expect, such as a table in the center, which gave it the feeling of a booth, as well as armrest. Man, it feels nice to be able to enjoy things like this. Do you think this is how the higher-ups on Earth used to live? No doubt. And we all hate them for it. Well, we have the excuse of actually helping the public, so we can rest easy knowing we've earned the right to enjoy these things. What are you talking about, bro? We just arrived a day ago. What did you do other than steal credit? I didn't mean that I was the one who had earned it. Just that we are friends with the one who did. Therefore, we get benefits. While both Pero Roncino and Ainz laughed at the joke, Buku Buku Chagama merely shook her head incredulously. Well, I hope that our looks won't hinder us, since it's another human nation, and one that's being attacked by demi-humans to boot. I think they would have to let us in, Mamanga-san, given that we are coming as diplomats, as well as assisting them if the opportunity presents itself, so I don't think they have a choice in the matter. While his words were somewhat cold, they were also true. No country would be foolish enough to turn away potential help due to racial prejudice. Especially not one on the brink of collapse. Agreeing with that logic, the other two nodded their heads to his answer in agreement, and thus, the carriage that contained the last hope of the Dragon Kingdom was sent off, to answer the prayers of the populace hoping for a miracle. A roaring blaze stained the sky above it black from the thick plume of smoke that arose from it. However, this was not due to a festival or random flame that had started a forest fire. The proof of that was the screams that filled the air. Indeed, while this was a celebration, it would surely make anyone viewing it vomit at the scene. This was the great city of Narod. While it was not large, it was peaceful, and was quite a large export of grains and other foods, as the location surrounding it being quite fertile, therefore making farming a job that was high in demand. And while the city was still home to large amounts of food, it was now a different source. This was one of the staples of the Beastman kingdom. A banquet they held quite often now, since they had been making quite a large foothold in their neighboring country. As the Beastman ravenously devoured their live prey, relishing the screams as their own form of dinner and a show, one lone Beastman merely watched over the feast. While demi-humans and the like were already known to be much stronger than humans, one could tell at a glance that this was no normal Beastman. The first thing that insinuated that were his garments. While most would either forgo cloths entirely, or merely were the hides of animals, this one more what was clearly a high-class pelt, that formed around him almost like armor in of itself, and a large warhammer, that seemed to be formed out of the skull of some creature. The second was his rippling muscle, that even a troll would be hard-pressed to match, coated in pitch-black fur. He belonged to the race known as the 8 Beastmen. Beings already famed for their physical prowess. However, he was different. He was born with the talent of being able to grow twice as fast as the average being. This had already gifted him with considerable power compared to his peers. Yet, just as humans could train their bodies to fight, so could he. Unsatisfied with his strength, he began to hone his body through strenuous training in an effort to become the strongest. Eventually these efforts began to bear fruit, as he soon found himself being uncontested in his might, which far outstripped even the strongest of the beastmen, and through this, he was crowned as Lord, as might makes right is the motto most demi-humans lived by. I have to thank the Commonwealth for lending us their golems for this conquest. With their power, not even the Dragon Kingdom's mightiest warrior was a match for us. And with this we can speed up our conquest immeasurably. We may even have the kingdom within our grasp by the end of the week. A wry smile began to form on his face at the thought, and as the flames grew larger, the screams around him only made it grow wider. Enjoy your last few days alive, Draudillion, as no mercy will be shown to the likes of you. A carriage was racing across the land. While this on its own was hardly a rare sight, multiple factors were present that would make any bystander take a double take to make sure they were seeing correctly. The first of these factors was the beauty of the carriage. It was extremely large, much more so than any currently in production, and covered in gorgeous decorations that would make anyone gawk at them. While this on its own was a sight to turn heads, the fact that this priceless artifact that was less a form of transport than it was an art piece was utterly incongruent with its surroundings, being a tattered and bloodstained plane, only added to the oddity, and the contrast was such that it made anyone fearful of whatever resided in it. The second was the fact that the horses that pulled it were not but bones. While most common folk would simply name it as undead, which in of itself would not be strange on these undead-filled lands. However, more knowledgeable people may recognize them as the legendary monsters known as soul eaters. Either option would make one want to flee from it at all cost. Yet the truly knowledgeable would be able to piece together the mystery and learn of the inhabitant of this carriage, for only one being could use such beast as his steeds. The Sorcerer King. While not many sought his departure from Irantal, those that did could only wonder what scheme was being born this time, as any nation that saw emissary from the undead monarch, either were going to be rewarded richly, or utterly destroyed. Whatever option it was, it assuredly changed the world around him, as if it was merely bending to his whims. Whatever option was going to be picked today remained to be seen, however. If this map is correct, we should be about 75% of the way there by now. Ainz over the course of the journey had been acting as the trio's personal GPS, as they were not used to the commodities of the past like Ainz was, so a 2-day carriage ride was not their forte. Therefore, his constant status updates were the only thing keeping the two sane. Ugh, good. While the novelty of riding in one of these was nice, it wore off after the first few hours. So we're almost there? Most likely we'll reach our destination by noon. But that still means a few more hours to go. This whole thing wouldn't even be that bad if we could just sleep through it, though the only one who even has that option is you little bro. As Bokubuko Chagama was a slime, she was much like Ainz in that she couldn't sleep, as her race did not have that biological function. While Peroroncino could have chosen to sleep on the journey by taking of his ring of sustenance, he chose not to out of courtesy for the two, as this way they could all talk instead of him opting out of it. Well, I really didn't considering the circumstances, but yeah, that would definitely have sped things up. We still had some fun either way, as I do enjoy talking with you. Though it also may have been better if the view from the window wasn't nothing but empty plains. Well, that should change soon enough. Oh. By the way, I was thinking, won't our appearances affect how we're seen by the public? I'm sure they know about Momonga-san being undead and all, but what about us? A slime and birdman don't exactly seem to scream friendly. I have always gone to other countries as undead, because peddling deception is a surefire way to get on their bad side. It would be best if we just were ourselves. Although, Chagama-san, can't solution morph into a human shape despite being a slime? Can't you do that as well? While they had created solution in that form, there didn't seem to be any reason why a normal slime couldn't do the same thing. She simply shrugged her shoulders at the remark. However, beats me. Just moving is kind of a pain. It's like constantly walking in a long skirt. Though maybe when we head back I could figure it out and ask her. Since we're almost there, it doesn't really matter. It's our fault for charging straight ahead like that without an action plan. That sounds a lot like Yumeko-san. True, but if we really were her, then we would probably just charge in instead of approaching diplomatically. Hell, she'd probably just kill the beastmen first before actually coming here. Yeah, hopefully she comes along eventually. The mood in the carriage grew somber at the remembrance of an old friend. While Ainz would normally be even more sad, the fact that he had met so many of his friends within a short time frame gave him hope of seeing the others again. So he did not dwell on it for too long. After some seconds of contemplation, Ukubuku Chagama broke the silence by bringing up what should have been brought up long ago. Seeing as we brought the topic up, what is our plan for the delegation? We're almost there, and it isn't like they're going to expecting us to arrive. We're essentially the most powerful being in the world going out to say hello. Anyone else would naturally be suspicious of us, right? Especially one that is on the brink of collapse. She was right. While they knew that they were going to the country as diplomats, Ainz hadn't even considered the implications that they may be turned away at the gates. He was so focused on the potential rewards of saving yet another kingdom that was in peril. But for all he knew, they may think he was orchestrating it. Ainz felt his non-existent stomach cramping up and was about to fall into panic as his ruler image was seen through yet again. He calmed down as he remembered that he was with people who saw him as an equal, friends, and not one of the NPCs or his followers, and allowed himself to relax, as anyone could have made that mistake. Looks like that's becoming somewhat of a nervous tic. You're right. I hadn't even thought of that. If we plan to assist them in this war, then we need to think of a way to actually be trusted enough to become a collaborator. From what I've heard, most countries don't have a high opinion of the Sorcerer Kingdom due to the whole undead thing. What about presenting a gift? I feel like that is customary for nations to do when receiving diplomats. That does sound somewhat familiar. Was it Punito-mo who said that? His friend of the past was well known for his love of strategy games outside of Yggdrasil. While he had vaguely remembered his non-stop ramblings on his love for them and their mechanics, some things had managed to worm his way into his memories. He was the first one to come to mind, as his hobbies seemed to fit the bill for the information. That gut. Yeah, it probably was him, seeing as he always knew a lot about things like that. I bet things would go a lot smoother if he were with us, then we wouldn't need to worry about things like this. This really is troublesome, huh? Ainz couldn't help but chuckle at Pero Roncino's cry of despair, as he had been in the same position many times before. Indeed, that it is. Well, if we are going to offer a gift, then what should we give them? We don't want to come off looking cheap or pompous. What do you think, Momonga-san? You're asking me? Honestly. I'm probably no better at this than you, Chagama-san, but I can try to think of something. After a quick, relatively speaking, period of contemplation, Ainz reached into his pocket dimension to fish for 3 low-level items that he carried around, as per the hoarder style. He had set the items on the table between them, and what was brought out would surely make any thief drool with excitement. The first item was a sparkling tiara. The outer rim and inside of the tiara was crafted out of silver, to go alongside the diamond that made up the inner pieces, with a singular large one at the center of it that sparkled even more brightly than the surrounding pieces of powdery jewels. The second item was a piece of ore that Ainz had with him. While it was not as strong as the metal he had asked the dwarves to use in his armor he requested, it was still quite serviceable, being around a level 30 metal known as galvam. The Pleiades outfits were all suits that were partially made of metals formed from this alloy, so it was quite valuable for any denizen of the New World. The third and final item on display was a pure white sword with golden edging. Though such a weapon was naturally not made of such a soft metal, and instead was made of adamantite, with gold and white gold used to cover and inlay the weapon with intricate designs that resembled the vines of a rose bush along its hilt, that went down the shaft to form a rose as the pommel. All three of these items were quite exquisite in make, and while Ainz was not the connoisseur on all things fashionable, he could at least see they were aesthetically pleasing. Maybe these could work. What do you think, little bro? Well, if it were me, then I would prefer the sword or the tiara. The ingot doesn't make much sense to me. Oh? And why is that? I had gifted one of these to the dwarves a while back to forge me a set of armor, and the forge master seemed to be quite happy with the item. Though he did run away from the country with it. That's the problem among us, and a dwarf would naturally be happy to see a new ore, since smithing is their livelihood, at least according to the lore of Yggdrasil, so of course they would be happy to receive an unknown material. But how would another nation react to such an item? Anyone who was not knowledgeable on ores would most likely just be confused about what to do with it. Naturally. If one were to give someone who preferred to stay inside sports equipment, they would most likely just look at you with an expression of, "What am I supposed to do with this?" You may be right about that. I guess the ingot is off the table. Literally. Ainz said this as he put it back in his pocket space, and one could practically hear the but-dumb TSS sound as he did so. But what about the other two? Surely a tiara would be a good idea to give to the queen of a nation? I do agree with you to some extent, but if they already have a crown as an heirloom, it may seem quite insulting to them. Not only that, sis, but they could take it as us trying to symbolize that we are the true rulers of them, by having their symbol of royalty come from a foreign nation, and one they're cautious of to boot. That sounded somewhat smart. When did you get common sense like that? One of my games had a plot like that, and it seemed applicable here. At this revelation, she simply sagged her body to droop her head down with a wet hoe. I thought there was hope for you. Such a shame. The performance she had put on was quite convincing. As if one had lost their last bit of hope, though he could not tell whether it was acting given the circumstances. Well, then that just leaves the sword. I personally feel like this option can't go wrong. Many nations have a weapon as a symbol of office, or just as treasures, and unlike the tiara, they won't take it as an insult if they already have one, since it is upping their power, as a good magic weapon can cause one's power to skyrocket. Well, we still have time to decide what we want to give, but this item seems like a good placeholder for now in case we don't find anything else. You got any ideas, bro? How about just giving virgins? Don't nations do that? The carriage practically jumped with the sudden bang that rang out from a head striking a table. The source was of course Pero Roncino, as Buku Buku Chagama had slammed him into it after hearing such a reply. Can't you keep your hormones in check for 3 seconds? The room was suddenly filled with a clamorous uproar as laughter, complaining, and whines melded together to form a truly happy mood. For some. The walls outside of the capital were practically overflowing with soldiers. Fighters of all kinds were stationed at each checkpoint, and 2 archers occupied the watchtowers instead of the usual one. While the responses that one would see upon witnessing this ridiculous amount of soldiers would either be awe at how a nation could gather this many troops, or chastising their prioritization of only one section, the universal feeling of worry would naturally be present, as this amount of troops could only mean one thing: preparing for war. Since sending soldiers out to the sole remaining city other than the capital would only result in more casualties, the decision was made to station every guard on the borders of the capital, for an all-out siege to occur when the enemy did arrive. With 120,000 soldiers each at the rank of an iron rank adventurer, one might think that they were at a large advantage. But when one thought that they only had quantity on their side, the odds began to drop quite drastically. The strongest of these soldiers were the captains of each unit, which could stand as equals with mithril rank adventures. While they were not strong enough to constitute as secret weapons, they each could act as a one-man army for a short while in a time of crisis to regroup the rest. One such figure, Captain Thrawn, was assigned to look over the barracks outside of the main gate. Though this seemed like a less important task, the truth was he had an alarming amount of stress put upon him, as defending the main gate was of critical importance. So he had to be informed of any anomalies, however small. Captain Thrawn. And it would seem that his work was about to begin once more. Sir. Yes, what is it, soldier? Has there been sightings of the enemy? Well, the thing is, we aren't sure. The watchtowers spotted a carriage moving towards us in the distance, and upon closer inspection, it seems to be heralded by undead horses of some kind. The undead? Though the man must have, though his exclamation was due to the shock of hearing the nemesis of the living were approaching the capital, he was shocked for a different reason. Though the common soldiers hadn't been informed of this, the Queen gave out orders to the higher-ups to be on the lookout for emissaries from the Sorcerer Kingdom, and if spotted, to inform her as soon as possible. Indeed. What should we do? Should we try to take it out from a distance? The archers are already at the ready. Since that country was well known by now to be ruled by the undead, it was only natural that they would use them for such purposes. Like of a horse and groom. At least he figured as much, as that was the most plausible explanation. And if that was the case... No, the sudden shout caused the man's shoulders to tremble, as he had not expected such an explosive reaction to the news. Tell the archers to cease fire immediately, and prepare to greet it at the gate. We must not antagonize that carriage at all cost. Why, yes, sir, right away. If his unit had scared off the emissary from their nation's sole saving grace, he didn't think he would even be allowed to live to see the battle. So the Sorcerer Kingdom has finally showed themselves to us, huh? I hope that the rumors are true, because if they're not, then we're finished. The captain finished his thought with a prayer to the gods, before setting out to meet the diplomats with what he hoped was a proud way. The carriage ground to a halt once it had reached a certain distance from the main gate. Though Thrawn attempted to do a quick inspection of his grooming that would be adequate to greet another nation's emissary, fashion was not the most pressing matter at present, so he could only hope to look as presentable as possible before them with what he had at present. Granted, to some the level and quality of armor could signify status in its own right. For example, the 4 Imperial Knights of the Empire never removed their armor for certain events, as once would need to remain on guard at all times surrounding the king of a nation. Because of this, their armor was made to look as regal as possible so that they may be presentable even then. However, he was not nearly prestigious enough to process a handmade set, however that was not to say his armor was cheap either. His suit of full-plate mithril still would cost quite a hefty amount, and no common adventurer below gold would be able to afford it. Well, no point in thinking about such pointless things when they're already here. Besides, this was an unannounced visit, so I doubt they will complain at a lack of formal attire. Though he had received emissaries in the past, he began to feel sick at the pressure of having to bear such a responsibility. This was by far and away the defining moment of the Draconic Kingdom's future. If they were displeased, how would they gain their help? This burden of which almost made him feel nauseous, yet he could not simply leave. He had to bear with it. As the carriage's door began to open, he steeled himself and began to rehearse what he would say, yet as he saw what stepped out of the object, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. It can't be. Though I had thought of the possibility, I hadn't expected it to be real. Before him stood the sovereign of the nation of undead. The sorcerer king Ainz. Though he had heard second-hand accounts of his appearance, mere descriptions could not properly convey his presence. Now that the real thing stood before his eyes, he was left speechless. Certainly his appearance was that of an undead. The best proof of this was the fact that not a scrap of flesh could be seen on his body. He was a skeleton, plain and simple. Blood-red motes of flame danced in his empty eye sockets, staring at the gate's contingent with a burning gaze. However, in contrast to that, the cloths he wore were all of exemplary quality. He could not ever recall seeing garments that exuded such majesty. The pitch-black robe with gold accents seemed to only exacerbate his dark form that much more by adding on to it. A ring was on each of his fingers, save for one, and all of them were also the product of the highest caliber of smith, as they were so intricate, it would take an inhuman amount of skill to make. Yet the last thing that stood out was a halo of ebony that surrounded his form. While his status as an undead drew fear from all who gazed upon his form, his clothing and aura gave of a feeling of nobility. With both of these factors combined, it would seem that his very presence emitted an oppressive aura that made him seem larger than life. Truly, this was the true form of the Sorcerer King. Nobody who saw him would dare question that. Though why had the monarch come in person? One would normally send an emissary such as a noble or representative. No nation would have its ruler come in person to a new nation it was just establishing contact with, right? Though he was stunned upon the initial impact, what followed him was also quite shocking. The first being was what appeared to be some type of demi-human. It had mostly avian features and emitted a golden radiance at all times. Though the aura it gave of seemed to practically scream divine, he felt uneasy due to their current predicament. The second was a simple slime. Though he had come to expect creatures wearing artifacts of immeasurable quality by now, this one didn't seem to have anything noticeable flashy, and was just a simple pile of sludge, in every definition of the word. Though he could see something within its depths, he couldn't make it out, and thus gave up. These beings caused his survival instincts to go into overdrive just from being in their vicinity. Each and every one emitted a wave of overpressure that was unique to the strong, which sent chills down his spine. Though they may be coming on peaceful terms, in theory anyway, he could not relax. The shock was such that he forgot why he had come here in the first place. Greetings, I assume you are the leader of this garrison that has come to welcome us? It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I am the Sorcerer King. Ainz. The statement practically flowed with regal bearing, something only an exceptional ruler had about them. Snapping back into reality, the captain gave his practiced introduction as smoothly as reading off a script. I am honored by your presence, Your Majesty. A day does not go by where I haven't heard of your grand deeds and name. Might I ask what has caused you to visit our esteemed nation? Ah yes, you see, there is a certain matter that I wish to discuss with your queen. Unfortunately, I cannot go into too much detail about the specifics, as this is a matter of national secrecy. However, I feel that she is in possession of knowledge that could be of great benefit to me, and I wish to negotiate a trade for it. Is this a problem? This was thoroughly unexpected. He had assumed this was simply going to be a diplomatic meeting between nations, and would result in trade deals, and the hope was to convince them to help with the beastmen's scourge. But if he had come to negotiate a trade, perhaps convincing him would not be needed. And not at all, Your Majesty. It was just surprising is all. As one of the undead, you must have lived an extremely long life, have you not? I feel that any and all knowledge in the world would already be known by you. His reasoning for asking this had been twofold. The first was to see if he could peer through any lies. Letting someone as powerful as the Sorcerer King enter the presence of the Queen for an undisclosed reason was a very risky move. The second was a rather selfish one. He merely wanted to know why the undead king would not possess this knowledge already. While it's not completely selfish, it's still useful to know this for the future. Indeed, compared to you humans, my life has spanned many a generation. While he was answering this question, he noticed the birdman whisper something to the slime, though he couldn't make it out due to the distance between them. However, I have spent most of that time studying magic, thus I regret to say my knowledge on external affairs of the world was somewhat limited until recently. There is something I wish to confirm with your queen, if that is okay. I have also prepared a gift to bestow upon her as a sign of good faith. Though the idea still unnerved him somewhat, this was non-negotiable, as they had to acquire his help at all cost. And disregarding his undead status, he had done nothing to warrant suspicion so far. Therefore, only one option remained. Is that so? I understand, Your Majesty. I shall send someone to inform the Queen of your arrival, as we currently have a lot we are dealing with at the moment, so she cannot see you right away. I apologize for this inconvenience. Think nothing of it. It's only natural in these instances. I'm more than willing to wait a little until she is prepared. Very well. Until then, would you care to be given a tour of the capital? Unfortunately, we don't have anything prepared due to Your Majesty's sudden arrival, though if it pleases you, we can prepare whatever you wish. Though this was obviously not the time for such things, they had to get on his good graces. It might well be possible that whatever he is asking of her is not nearly valuable enough to assist them. Therefore it was his job to make him happy and give him some measure of goodwill towards them if needed. The responsibility was quite hefty, and the pressure he felt was quite palpable, to the point where he simply wanted to yell and scream "Why me" to the sky, cursing the gods for forcing this onto him. Though he knew this thinking was pointless now. The stage was already set. It is fine. I have nothing that interests me at present, though if I notice something on this tour, I will be sure to ask. Very well, Your Majesty. Then please allow me the privilege of escorting you and your followers around our proud city. As he was about to turn into the city, he heard the monarch grumble something into his hand. Though he couldn't make it out due to how quiet it was, the tone of the voice implied that he was upset. Had he already screwed up somehow? The instinct to yell grew within him once more, but he quashed it with some effort. For all he knew, this was their last chance. With a rallying cry in his heart, he shouted to himself, "I must keep him satisfied at all cost." With vigor renewed, he headed into the city, determined not to fail. As Ainz and his friends were taken on their tour through the streets of the capital, they could not help but feel quite shocked at how clean the city looked. Though the housings and other such buildings were no different from any other city, the streets were all paved with pure white bricks, and the amount that was used in the surrounding buildings became denser the closer one was to the castle. It was easily the most advanced city in terms of architecture, with only the Empire's Arwentar coming close in beauty. Though it could not compare to Nazarick, it was pretty in its own unique way. The buildings seemed to be a mixture of modern and ancient techniques, with houses ranging from simple saloons to apartment buildings. If almost seemed to be directly taken from Earth. The city was built in a circular fashion, similar to Irantal, with the castle situated in its center. The cylindrical tower seemed to shoot out from the ground, surrounded by other pearl-white structures which gave it the feeling of being otherworldly. Where did such techniques derive from, I wonder? Could a player have something to do with this? Though Ainz had yet to find a player within this world, the possibility was not zero. There was much proof of their existence in this world through the many influences scattered throughout the world. They hadn't investigated this kingdom as of yet, so it was very possible that one was here or at least existed in the past to have spread these techniques. It would seem Pararancino and Buku Buku Chagama had the same idea, as they were also looking suspiciously at some of the more modern-day buildings. Though they most likely had not reached the same conclusion Ainz had, they were certainly suspicious. "Excuse me, Throndano, might I ask some questions about this city? The architecture is unlike anything I've ever seen before." "Ah yes, many people who visit this city say the same thing. This city was founded hundreds of years ago by the Brightness Dragon Lord, and through the use of magic, had created this city in the image he desired. Though only the center areas of the kingdom were built by him. The rest was expanded upon over time, and used the techniques within that section to shape the others." "Ho! And where is this Dragon Lord now?" His suspicion in the Dragon Lords grew ever higher as he now had even more connections with them and players. Coming to this city was definitely the right move. Well, nobody has seen him in decades. Most assume he is hibernating away underground, or in his own lair somewhere, but it's all really conjecture. Even when he was around, people rarely interacted with him, so it's anyone's guess on his current location. Does this dragon have anything to do with the council state? Oh no, that place has 5 other dragons. While I don't know what they are called, the Brightness Dragon Lord was never one of them. He never showed himself often, yet still spread his bloodline to humans. Quite the enigma, that one. Though it would seem that this was at a dead end, Ainz was not deterred in the slightest. It was unlikely that a mere commander of foot soldiers would know of such things. All he had to do was slowly squeeze this information out of the Queen through trust after saving the nation until he had learned what he needed to know. As Ainz made a mental data point to remember this info, Bubu Buku Chagama suddenly spoke up. "I have a question, actually. Despite the state the city is in, the citizens that I have seen all seem to have worried expressions on their faces. Though I know we aren't the most welcoming group, even ones in the distance have quite a gloomy look on their faces. Why is that? Ainz adjusted his view to look at some of the nearby commoners, and sure enough, they all wore downtrodden expressions, as if they all had something troubling them at the same time. As I'm sure you have no doubt heard by now, the beastmen constantly attack our nation's cities in order to feast upon their inhabitants. This has been the case for several years now. But recently, they have gone into an all-out war with us, and have been gaining a lot of ground due to them borrowing ultra-powerful golems from the Commonwealth. As a result, fortifications have been increased around the capital, and the citizens have been left feeling worried at what is to come. Ho! Golems, you say? Ainz had originally come here to fend off the beastmen and use their gratitude to chain them, which he would then use to obtain all kinds of information. Though this changed the matter. Golems were seen as extremely rare creatures in this world, taking a year to even make a wood golem. But if these beastmen were in possession of golems that were either powerful or unique to this world, then that may change his plans entirely. How many of these golems do they possess? From what we know, they only possess 4. However, they each have supreme strength, that was even able to defeat our country's adamantite adventurer, Cerberate, with relative ease. Ainz could feel his collector's spirit rising as he heard this news. While I doubt they have anything like Gargantua, their strength could greatly increase Nazaric's power. If they are stronger than I anticipate, then it may be worth taking the answers in this kingdom by force and blaming it on the beastmen. As he began to mull over his options, a man in pure white armor began to sprint over to Ainz and his party. Through a quick analysis, he seemed to be a guard of some type. More than likely higher than Thrawn in status. Your Majesty, I have been sent to inform you that the Queen has finished her preparations and will see you now. That was much quicker than I anticipated. Well, no matter. This simply makes things easier. It seems we will be splitting up here, Throndano. Thank you for the tour of this city, it was most pleasant. The honor was all mine. I hope your Majesty can reach a beneficially mutual agreement. As do I. Now then, guardsmen, may you please guide us to the royal palace? Of course, your Majesty. Just like before, he was led by the guard to the deeper reaches of the city, and it seemed as if they still had a ways to go, but Ainz did not mind this. It simply gave him more time to think of an answer to his question. Would saving this city really benefit him? Ear liar. What is the current status on the beastmen invasion, Karen? Have there been any noticeable movements from them as of yet? The throne room of Queen Draudilin was once again ablaze with panic as the nobles and royalty of the country scrambled to find a solution to their problem. Each day that passed merely felt like the countdown of a clock, that would surely be the end of them when it reached its end. Yes, the reports from the last remaining city, Iareth, came in. You don't need to make it sound so grim, no matter. Hurry up and brief me. Yes. According to them, they are already moving out from Narod in hopes of claiming that city for themselves now. If this keeps up, they be at the capital by the end of the week. How should we proceed, your Majesty? Faced with these seemingly insurmountable odds, all she could do was sigh. Problem after problem kept piling on without an end in sight, and the weight of all of these was beginning to get to her. For one, the city of Iareth was practically dead in the water. Though she had fought against the Desi Sun, they had taken nearly all of the city's troops to boost their own fighting force for one last stand at the capital. The guilt of which had gnawed at her heart. Though she had still given the order to evacuate. A large portion of the city still remained. Some due to not having the funds to leave, and others because they still needed to fight for the sake of the kingdom. If they weren't there, then they would already reach the capital sooner than expected, which would shred even the faintest iota of hope they had. The second was the matter of the Dragon's Kingdom's defenses. Quite frankly, they were awful. They had relied too much on other nations for help, and lacked the funds to bolster their own armies. Even now they were praying for the miracle that was the Sorcerer Kingdom to approach them and offer assistance, though that was beginning to look like a pipe dream. Truly, she was at a loss. The word flee ran through her mind, but vanished as quickly as it came. That was a last resort for if they were truly overwhelmed, as they had nowhere to go at present. Though it was seeming like that was likely going to be the end case scenario. Besides, she didn't deserve to flee after all that's happened under her rule. She soon realized she had not answered their question yet, and gave the only answer she could give. We do the only thing we can do. Fight until the bitter end. After everything that has transpired, we need to make a final stand and show those bastards we aren't to be underestimated. We still outnumber the beastmen, so we can still win with strategy. We just need to make preparations in the meantime. Of course, Your Majesty. It just seems like our chances have been getting worse and worse with each bit of news we receive. We will assuredly win in the end, though it's only natural to be worried in times like these, no? You think I'm not? She simply shook her head at his remark. Of course. I don't intend to blame you. But you're right. We have to win this war for the sake of the people. Don't forget, we still have the possibility of the Sorcerer Kingdom coming to assist us. Everyone simply gave a bitter smile in response to the nobleman's exclamation. Though it was true the possibility existed of them lending aid, it was seeming more like a dream at this point, with all-out war being merely days away. Everyone in the room understood this, with them all steeling themselves for death. They would most likely perish in this coming fight, but as long as the Queen survived and they won in the end, they would accept their fates. Still, there were some who feared their demise, and clung to the smallest possibilities that they could in order to retain their sanity. Of course, though we should not think to rely on that at this point. Right now we should simply focus on winning with what we have available. Oh, of course, Your Majesty. As they were about to begin discussing this, the doors to the room flew open, prompting the guards to reach for their weapons at the unannounced intruder. A panting soldier took the place of the double doors, who was bent at his knees, hungrily gasping for breath. Your Majesty. After the initial shock of the intrusion, everyone had their attention focused on the newcomer to see what could warrant such a response. Your Majesty. Emissaries from the Sorcerer Kingdom have arrived. The already silent room's decibel count seemed to drop even further with the news that was just given. And after everyone had heard and processed what was said, the same sound was heard from everybody in the room. Ha-a-awa? As the trio advanced down the corridor in silence to the throne room, the surrounding people cleared out of the way for them to move without impediment. Though it was common courtesy to move for the king of a nation, some even stopped in the middle of their task to create a path for them, which could not help but make Ainz rather suspicious. Anyone who was in the middle of a conversation would freeze up at the sight of the entourage and wait for them to leave before resuming, which left only the sound of their footsteps resonating through the halls. Though it could not compare to the 9th floor, it was not fair to compare the two, as the gap that existed between the standards of the New World and Nazarick were like an insurmountable wall. Still, it was nice in its own way. The hall's floor was a marble white with a carpet that led to the doorway. While similar to Nazarick in design, there was no door at the end, simply leading up to the throne. One could see the effort that must have went into designing such a hall, so it was impressive in its own right. As they neared the end of the great walkway, the throne came into view. It was fairly simple by Ainz standards, though in the grand scheme of things, it was a fairly nice seat. Though small in make, the rim of the back seemed to be made of some metal that gave it a similar luster to the room, most likely silver, with sea green cushioning that was pleasing to the eye. And upon it was a young girl, no, a child, that could not have been over the age of 10. Though her outfit was indeed something befitting of royalty, a frilled dress that stopped just above the knee, her appearance could not have been further from the expectations. Ainz almost felt like he was being duped for a moment until she made her response. He could even see Pero Roncino's eyes widening next to him. Greeting, Your Majesty, I am known as Queen Draudillion of the Dragon Kingdom. Though I am sure you already knew that. I am truly honored to be in your presence. But before we get down to business, as a show of good faith, my nation has prepared a gift to welcome you to our country. Karen, please give them the gift. The cutesy voice that could not belong to anything other than a little girl only further insinuated the idea that he was being pranked, but he chose to withhold judgment until his assumption was concrete. At the sound of the man's name being called, the one closest to the queen moved forward and presented to Ainz a ring that glowed from within. The band was made from silver and gold, with a large yellow gem that was perfectly cut into a sphere at the head. It was most likely a magic item based on how gifts between countries usually worked. This ring is one of our country's most prized possessions, as it was made by the Brightness Dragon Lord himself, and possesses more power than any magic item in this kingdom at the moment. It is said to be the ultimate accessory to any magic caster. Though he was about to say something along the lines of I am most pleased, as he was used to being the superior of others in conversations, it would be terribly rude to do so now, as they were the lessers in this situation, and Ainz did not want to seem pompous to a country he was trying to earn favors out of, so he quickly changed his speech pattern. I am most grateful Draudilian Dano. Ainz was not faking his gratitude, as collecting magic items was one of his favorite pastimes. Especially if they are unique to this world. So being given a rare artifact like this was quite pleasing. Before he continued the conversation, he cast a silent, all-appraisal magic item, to learn its effects. Exclamation point. However, despite not expecting much, what he detected completely threw him off his rhythm for a moment. Just what is this item? The ring, named the Earth's Essence, was something completely foreign to Ainz. The abilities it possessed were not something that Yggdrasil could replicate. It was able to exchange EXP for a 75% boost to spells, and could make even very minute spells devastating attacks. How is this even possible? Powering up spells like this should only be available to classes like Ulbert's World Disaster. Not only that, but only extremely high-level skills can use up experience, but that's relegated to the specific skill itself. Ainz' joy suddenly soared as he had just obtained an extremely rare artifact with little effort. As he wondered if the other side even knew its value, he realized that he hadn't spoken up after receiving the ring and instead had been staring at it for the past few seconds. He was filled with a burning shame at how rude he had been, and scrambled to hide his elation in front of the other party. This is quite the find. I must once again thank your grace. However, my nation also had the same idea as you, and we have prepared a gift for you as well. As Ainz put the ring into his pocket space, he also pulled out the sword from earlier and gifted it to the same man who had handed him the ring. This was a weapon from my personal armory that I though may prove of some assistance to your majesty. Please accept it. At the sight of the weapon, most of the people in the room's eyes seemed to bulge out of their sockets, while others sagged their shoulders as if in defeat for some reason. However, when the sword was presented to the queen, her face paled slightly before regaining its usual youthful complexion. This really is an amazing weapon, your grace. I truly appreciate it, and we will be sure to find an appropriate wielder for it. But now that the formalities are out of the way, we can get on to the main topic. Your Majesty, may I ask what brings you to our kingdom? Ainz was slightly worried that he had given the wrong item due to the initial reaction, but now there was no going back and he had to press on with his pitch. Very well. My reasoning for my visit is twofold. The first is a merely wish to establish diplomatic contact with you. I have been setting out to other kingdoms as of late to create friendly ties with other nations that I believe will benefit me, and to that end I have come here to do just that. The Queen nodded along with his speech, which prompted him to continue. My second reason is less diplomacy than it is mutualism. I wish to negotiate a trade between us, as I have come to learn that your country possess information that I might have use for, and due to that fact, I would like to establish a trade that will benefit us both. Would you find these arrangements acceptable? The Queen merely looked to the ceiling for a moment and pondered the matter, and after a brief period of cognition, responded. I would be more than happy to abide by your Majesty's terms. That was too fast. Any country would at least have asked what the terms were in more detail before agreeing, right? Not to mention there was practically no pushback from their end whatsoever. Every country he had visited so far had at least one naysayer in the crowd when something like this occurred, but it seemed to be a unanimous approval this time. Though his suspicious was growing during this meeting, he could no longer hold back his tongue. This was all too good to be true. Draudilian Dano, while I am happy to hear this, I have to ask, what are you hoping to gain from this? Not only have the servants of this building completely avoided my group as to not get in our way, but you also present us with one of your nation's most treasured possessions, as well as immediately agreed to my proposal. Forgive me, but this all seems to be a little too good to be true, and I can't help but feel that it's pushing towards some hidden agenda. The room's inhabitants began to grow pale, much like the queen had before, until their faces almost blended in with the marble behind them. Draudillion, on the other hand, merely smiled bitterly and shook her head. So you've already seen through it. May I ask that everyone except Karen and His Majesty's followers please leave the room? Though the looks of worry were plainly obvious, since it was a direct order from the queen, they had to comply. And so they began to file out, leaving only the 5 people present in the hall, which now appeared much too large for the group. Before we continue, Your Majesty, may I ask that we drop the formalities for now? I have no qualms with that if you deem it acceptable. In an instant, the bright and cheery little girl that had occupied the seat had vanished, and their place was the same girl, but whose face seemed to be completely done with everything. Thank you, Your Majesty. With the stress my kingdom is under right now, I really can't hold up this cutesy ruler facade, so I needed to clear them out to do so. I also feel it is best to have these discussions in private. I take the shape of this childlike body because it is easy for me to get on people's good graces, regardless of age or gender. But I feel that is not a strategy that will work to my benefit this time, so I will have to stop trying so hard with that. I see. Then could you please answer my question? Ainz was not displeased with the info that she revealed. In fact, he felt some kinship with her, as he had to constantly practice his ruler persona just as he was doing right now. However, that was not what he needed to know right now. I'll be frank with you, it was simply because we were left with no other option. Our country is on the verge of collapse at the moment, and your nation is the only one who can change that. Your Majesty. In response to the man's wail, most likely due to her revealing the precarious state of her nation to a possible enemy, he was met with a scowl from the queen. Don't start complaining about this now. If we want help from them, we need to be completely transparent. Whether it is by them or the beastmen, we are bound to be destroyed. Please do not say such things. There is still options left that. Like what? Even if we had the money, it's not as if that would be able to help. All we could hope to do is enlist more soldiers, which would take time in of itself. Or is there some other way I'm not seeing? His lips merely pressed into a flat line as a response. Please pay him no heed for that display, Your Majesty. Now on to why we are trying so hard. It's because, as I said, we have no other choice. Until now we have relied on the country's sole adamantite adventurer team to fend them off, but as you may have heard, they recently perished. Ainz moved his chin as an indication to continue. We also gave yearly donations to the theocracy to send the sunlight scripture to our nation and fend them off with us, but for some unknown reason, they have not sent them to us despite the fact that we already paid them their fee. Because of this, we assume they have just left us to die. Ainz silently gave thanks to them for all their uses thus far. He almost felt grateful that they attacked the village at that time since it had given him so much leverage. While we could have gone to other nations, I doubt they have the power to help us to any significant degree. However, Your Majesty is already known to possess incomparable might, and because of that, I felt that supporting you with all our nation's might was the best decision. Which is why we had signed off on your war with the kingdom despite not establishing contact with you yet. Eh? They did that? Of course, Draudillion Dano. I assumed that was the case myself, which is why I felt it was a good time to establish contact. Though I was not aware of the exact circumstances until now. As expected of Your Majesty, I would expect nothing less. But now that you have heard our nation's plight, may I ask your answer to our situation? Though I don't know what information you seek, I would happily tell you anything you need to know in exchange for my kingdom's continued preservation. Ainz delved into another round of introspection as he thought of the merits and demerits to the situation. Certainly they may possess information he could use, but what if the beastmen's golems were too strong to pass up? Should I agree to it, then if I find out that the beastmen hold more value, take the answers through a dominate spell, or would we not be able to learn enough like with Nigan? Or should I try to gain more info about them by asking her now? But wouldn't that rouse suspicion on me for asking about the enemy? And since I now have some of the other members, should I try and solve this through a majority? We will gladly assist you. His train of thought was cut short, however, by a certain birdman making the decision for him. Ah, well, I'm glad that you feel that way, but doesn't the sovereign have to be the one to sign off on this? It's fine. All three of us are equals, aren't we, Momonga-san? Why yes, Perorancino-san, but shouldn't we discuss this a bit more? Though he was surprised at his friend's eagerness, he would not oppose it if it was what the guild wanted. Everything he did was for the sake of his guild's survival, so if they wanted to do something, then he would naturally go along with it. It's fine, Momonga-san, besides I'm sure Wani-san feels the same, right? He turned his head to the pile of sludge that was his friend to see her nodding along with him. I agree, Momonga-san, I feel like this should be the best way to help Touch-san, don't you agree? She had said this in her trademark voice that put any attempts Straudalin had made to sound cute in vain. Since the guild had made its majority vote, Ainz could not complain. Very well. Then it would seem that we have reached a consensus, Straudiliandano. In exchange for whatever information we desire, we shall defeat the beastmen attacking your country. Is this acceptable? Yes, of course. We could ask for nothing more. On behalf of the Dragon Kingdom, we humbly accept your aid, Your Majesty. Momo. Please pay it no heed. I am Ainz Ulgaun. These words were spoken with the finality of an executioner's blade, leaving only one option. Why yes, of course, Your Majesty, Ainz Ulgaun. Thank you for your assistance in this war. Also, from the inflections in her tone of voice, it seemed that she was going to make another request. Well, as long as it's not too large, I guess I could grant it. May I join you on the battlefield? Ainz was completely bewildered. Not only him, but the other two were also making similar faces. Her own follower's face, however, could not even compare to theirs in terms of shock. What are you saying, Your Majesty? You should be nowhere near the battlefield. We cannot risk losing you. If I die, then so be it. How many have perished under my rule because I have failed to protect them? How can I call myself a ruler if I don't at least face the same risk my people have? Ainz could understand her conviction very well, as he too felt the same when he went to fight Sheltir to atone for his actions. His opinion on the monarch went up by a few notches. Your Majesty, the reason I'm asking this is not because I wish to see if you will uphold your end of the bargain, but merely because I want to see the menace that has wiped out my people and made sport of their deaths fall in terror with my own two eyes. If I could see that, then I could die with no regrets. Is that all? Then I would be more than happy to allow you to accompany me in this massacre. How soon would you like us to leave to defeat them? The invasion will be reaching our last city extremely soon, so if we could depart today, I would be extremely grateful. Then we shall leave 1 hour from now. I shall wait for Your Majesty by the main gates. Until then, Straudiliandano. And with that, the three beings left the throne room, leaving only silence in their wake. Your Majesty. Be a bit quieter, will you? I'm right here. As the rest of her court received the signal to enter the room once more, an eruption of questions came flying toward her. And after they had learned of the deal that was struck, they could not hold back their shock. You're wondering why I accepted the deal. Come now, use your heads. He probably knew there would be no other option for us from the beginning. And he is right, it's the only way to save our country is through him. Looks of confusion dawned on the nobles as she told them the truth. Bearing witness to this, she simply sighed and gave her explanation like she was talking to a child who could not understand something so easy to figure out. Think about it, we had prepared a gift for him to get us on his good graces, and he responded by giving us something of even greater quality. And by the look of things, he was not impressed with ours. That left us with no option but to tell him everything, as goodwill was no longer our option. Even so? Besides, what use is it that we are giving him information? It's not like us telling him info is going to cause our country to be destroyed sooner. We are simply choosing the only option we have. If we don't, then we're doomed. They could say nothing in the face of this, and merely lowered their heads as they all tried to accept it. Though seeing as all of their faces looked like they had just bitten into a worm, it was safe to say that was not happening. Still though, I have to wonder who the two that came with him were. If they really are on equal footing with him as they claimed, where did they come from? Could the Sorcerer Kingdom be ruled by multiple leaders? I feel like that would have been common knowledge if that was the case. It's probably something that we can't comprehend. Still, wonder why the other two agreed so readily? No matter. I need to prepare to travel. I'll be in my chambers if you need me. Maybe I'll get some wine while I'm at it.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.